We've just got some news out from the Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel saying that he is ready for action if he's given the word.
Yeah, that's right, Betty. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, he's in Malaysia. He just did an interview with the BBC. He said that the Defense Department has provided all possible military options to the president, and that the Defense Department is, in his words, ready to fully comply with whatever path the president wishes to take. So you heard from Secretary of State John Kerry yesterday. Now you're hearing from Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, all pointing to that the administration is moving closer and closer to announcing that it will be taking military action in Syria. Now, yesterday, the Secretary of State, he came out, said he's been speaking on behalf of President Obama in his conversations with his diplomatic counterparts. He came out yesterday, and for the first time, we heard a U.S. official publicly pinning the attack on Assad's government. He called the use of chemical weapons cowardly.
It is undeniable. The meaning of this attack goes beyond the conflict in Syria itself, and that conflict has already brought so much terrible suffering. This is about the large-scale, indiscriminate use of weapons that the civilized world long ago decided must never be used at all.
And Betty, the other thing we're seeing from the administration right now is that they're pouring cold water on these United Nations investigations, coming up with this report to confirm whether or not chemical weapons were used in those attacks last week. The administration is not waiting for that. They are going to be issuing its own report, its own intelligence report, to establish that it was, in fact, Assad's government that used those weapons, and we should be seeing that report soon, even within the next couple of days.
Julianna, what about a UN action? What about a UN resolution here?
You know, Betty, officials, they say that there's really no way that Russia is going to sign on, so very, very unlikely that we will have any sort of UN resolution. Another sign of that is that Russian officials were supposed to meet with U.S. officials this week on restoring peace in Syria, that peace conference, and that's now been postponed. The president made calls over the weekend to U.K. Prime Minister David Cameron and French President Francois Hollande. An official says that these are two key allies who will be playing a role in whatever military action the U.S. takes, as they were with Libya.
Julianna, thank you for that update on the growing tensions in Syria. That was Julianna Goldman, our White House correspondent. I want to bring in Richard Falkenrath, our Bloomberg contributing editor, also a former White House security advisor and now a principal at the Chertoff Group. And Richard, outline for us what are the options? What exactly would a military strike against Syria look like here?
Well, Betty, the president has a lot of different options, from invasion to imposing a no-fly zone. I think by far, though, the most likely is a limited package of very precise airstrikes against regime targets. These are the leadership itself, the military, and the intelligence service that could be carried out from U.S. warships in the region or from aircraft overhead. And that would be done very fast, probably in the middle of the night, and it would be announced by the president after it's all over.
Richard, I want to just step back for a moment. I mean, what in particular has been happening or is happening in that area to have prompted Assad's regime to strike with a chemical attack?
It's a good question. There's no clear answer. The Assad regime, of course, denies it. My personal hunch is that he's doing it to show his own opponents in the internal civil war that they've been fighting, that he can get away with this and the international community are not going to come to the rescue, and then to try to get them essentially to abandon all hope of prevailing against him so he can finally prevail in this long-running civil war. That's conjecture. We don't know yet. Clearly, it was a very provocative, brazen act to do it in such a large scale while the UN investigators were on the ground in Damascus.
Well, it is a very brazen act, Richard, and it sort of raises the question. I mean, as you mentioned, the Assad government has said, denied that this has happened. I mean, given the large scale of this, do they really think that they would be able to get away with this?
I don't think so. I mean, the foreign minister comes out and says this, and his job is to lie on behalf of his country. There's no way they could think that an attack of this scale would go unnoticed by the international community. And by the way, there were several smaller scale attacks that occurred last year, which also have now been attributed by the White House to the Assad regime after some period of investigation. So they must have known that they would get caught when this happened.